Fuller's Vintage Ale.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to a very special Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. This is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of English brewing. This is the 2023 bottle conditioned Fuller's Vintage Ale. Now, if you're new to the channel or you're new to beer, you may not be aware of Fuller's Vintage Ale, but in my opinion, and it is just an opinion, this is probably the best beer to come out of England, bar none. And I mean that after tasting a hell of a lot of English beer. Now, there is some absolute belters of English beer, but I just don't think they compare to this. And the reason is, I think, because this is so unique and the recipe changes every year, and to consistently come up with a beer that is world class every year to a different recipe, that really is testimony to how good Fuller's Brewery are. Now, if you're not aware of Fuller's, of course, they are a London brewery. They have been going since 1845. They are based in West London in a place called Chiswick, and their brewery is called the Griffin Brewery. And I've done a brewery tour there a few years ago. I'm thinking about doing another one this year as well with a few mates. So watch this space. I'll see if I can get some footage from that. But it really is, for me, what traditional English brewing is all about. Now, there are some fantastic English brewers out there. You know, if you want to go up north, you're talking about Timothy Taylor, Theakston's. Come down a little bit further, then you've got some of the Yorkshire breweries. Sam Smith's, I think, are a fantastic brewer. And you've also got some of the ones down south as well, Cotley as well, which one that really does spring to mind as being a good brewer. But for me, Fuller's are probably one of the best, if not the best, brewer in England, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that just because I'm from London and I'm trying to rep a London brewer, but I think if you ask most people, their beer is just consistently good. Now, I did have a bit of a blowout at Fuller's. I bought 3 vintage ales. I brought a 20. I'm looking at them now, seeing how long are they going to last. I got a 2019 one, a 2021, and I got a 2023 one as well. Now, these beers are not designed to be drunk straight away. They are meant to be left to mature. However, I am fucking useless when it comes to willpower. And I just love this beer so much that I want to try it for 2 reasons. A, obviously the willpower thing, but B, and that's Percy snoring down there. This is how interested he is. Anyway, the second reason is because when you leave these beers to mature, and I want to sort of hammer this point home. If you look at my Bateman's v Fuller's Vintage Ale comparison video, it's an hour long. I don't want to make this video an hour long because I had quite a few comments saying, I love your reviews and all that, but an hour long, fuck off. I'm not listening to you rabbit on for an hour. It's a fair comment. Even I wouldn't like to listen to me rabbiting on for an hour. But the point I'm trying to make is I like these beers when they're quite fresh. And the reason that is because when you let them condition themselves in the bottle, the flavour becomes very rounded. You haven't got the big boisterous flavours you have when it's quite fresh. A lot of the, I wouldn't say harshness, but the spikiness of the hops and the real robust character of the malt, it's all rounded down a little bit in my opinion, and it still makes for a great beer. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have bought them too if that wasn't the case. However, I like to try these quite fresh to see what they're like, and then maybe compare them or see how they fare after a few years, and that's why I bought them too, because I haven't reviewed the 2019 Fuller's Vintage Ale, but I did review the 2020, and that was a 10 out of 10. Again, all these Fuller's vintage ales that I've reviewed, and I've done one every year since. I've drank one in 2019, but I didn't review it because I wasn't reviewing beer at the time. The channel started in I think it was November or December 2019, and I'd already drunk the vintage ale, and it just didn't occur to me to get another one to review. But I've reviewed one ever since, and I want to try the 2021 again because they've all been 10 out of 10 beers. But I've always drunk them fresh. As I say, I've got no willpower, and I think the reason I haven't got the willpower is because this beer is so good. Now, Fuller's Vintage Ale, I'll get this out of the way. I'm not going to leave this to the last section. I'm going to put it in this section. Fuller's Vintage Ale is not cheap. That is £10 a bottle. You may get some older ones that are cheaper. Have a look on the Fuller's site. They're doing some for £7. They've been marked down in price, which I think is even better because you're getting a one that's been aged for quite a while. So if you haven't got the willpower, get on the website and get one. That's exactly what I did. I've got the 2019. So doing my maths, 20, 21, 22, 23. So that's 4. I may try and drink that next year. Who am I trying to kid? Well, it's at least 4 years old. These beers are good. Well, I would say at least 10 years. And I think on the back it says 10 years as well. What does it say? As with every vintage ale, this bottle conditioned beer is made to mature. Therefore, we always state before the best before date. The flavours will continue to develop for many years. A natural sediment will form. So store upright and pour carefully. Well, the sell by date on this is December 2026. So they're saying 3 years. I'd say you're good for 8 at least. I tried the Bateman's. Again, I don't want to keep going on about this Bateman's, the Fuller's Vintage Ale. But the Bateman's was from 2014. I tried that last year, I think. Was it last year? Yeah. So that's 8 years old. And it was fantastic. I mean, it's really good. On its own merits, it was great. However, it didn't stand up to the Vintage Ale, in my opinion. The Vintage Ale just had more raucous flavours, which I'm assuming this is what this has got. And I've been looking at the ingredients and researching what the ingredients are. So this video is really not about the history of Fuller's, etc., and the other fantastic beers that they do. This is going to be about the ingredients and about this year's vintage ale. So let's stop gassing and get on to the next section. Right, as I say, these vintage ales are brewed every year to a different recipe, and they've been doing that since 1997. And some of the earlier ones, the 1997s and 1998s, go for a hell of a lot of money. So, you know, spend your money wisely if you want to do that. But I know some people have got vintage ales from like 2004, 2005, and they've actually bought them in that date and they've left them and not drunk them. So kudos to them for having the willpower. Me personally, I haven't got it, but just have a look on eBay. You can find some of these vintage ales and they're still for sale, and they've got the alcohol in them as well. It's not just the bottle and the box, which, you know, some people will buy as well. But I will say you will get a different drinking experience from each one. So this review is only for the 2023 vintage ale. So just remember that. If you buy a 2019, the taste profile may be different. So there you go. Anyway, let's get on to the ingredients. So what they've done is let me get onto the bare bones of this beer. It comes in a box like that. Let me get it out. Get it out so I can show you. There it is. It's a 500ml bottle. Now, a lot of people say that this is based on the what is it? The Golden Pride. It's not really, or the 1845. It's got a similar sort of profile. They're trying to do the same sort of thing. It's like a real quality vintage old ale, if you know that style. The old ale style, in my opinion, it's high ABV, it's dark, and it's what this country does best. I would imagine, to compare it to something German, it would be like the equivalent of their Doppelbock, maybe even their Eisbock. Even though the brewing techniques are different, it's in that style of dark, high ABV beer. But these are individually serial numbered as well, which I think is a nice touch, and the serial number matches what's... Do they have them on the box as well? No, they don't. It's just on the bottle. But it's a 500ml bottle. It's 8.5%. And the ingredients, right, now this is where it gets interesting. So as I say, for the 100th time, it's a different recipe every year. This year's one, has got pale malt. That's your base malt. That's what gives it its basic sweetness. And they use something else on this as well, which is double roasted crystal malt. Now, you're probably wondering what that is. If it's double roasted crystal malt, it basically means that it's been kilned with the sugar still left on it, and they call it crystal malt because the sugar crystallises in the heat, and that gives it a really nice, sweet, fruity flavour. And you see crystal malt in a lot of top fermented English ales, and it's what makes it great. I would say that, you know, crystal malt combined with Maris Otter, you're not going to go wrong. I've just put the, or I was going to put the 5 Points Brewing best bitter on, which really surprised me, but they had Maris Otter in there, and that's a great malt, and it also had crystal malt, so you're not going to go wrong. And it was a great beer, but that's what you're getting with double roasted crystal malt. It's quite intense toffee, raisin, dark fruit flavour. That's what you're sort of talking about when you're talking about crystal malt and double roasted crystal malt as well. Now the hops, they've got 3 hop types, and they're not the hops you would be thinking of. They are, well, firstly, let's go for the first one. They're Opus hops. Now they're an English hop. They have quite interesting characteristics. They're quite fruity. They've got floral notes, citrus notes, spicy notes and earthy notes. So they're a uniquely versatile hop. You see them quite a lot in high strength English ales, dark English ales, and this is perfectly suited for this ale because that's what they're designed for. And as I say, they've got a broad spectrum of flavours. They've got that spicy and earthy note, which was synonymous with dark English ales, but you've also got the fruity, floral and citrus as well. So that's Opus hops that's in here. The code on that is CF182. Sometimes that's what you'll see it listed as if they don't call it Opus. The next one is Archer hops. Now Archer hops, again, another good English hop. Don't see it that often, but they've used it in here, and that's got some different flavours. It's got floral notes, which you wouldn't normally get with an English hop anyway, but it's got lime and peach as well. So there's some more fruity citrus and tropical fruit notes on them as well. They've also got a CF185 hop, which is a kind of experimental hybrid hop. And again, that's got peach and citrus notes in there as well. So I imagine there's going to be some quite intense fruity notes on this beer. Now underpinning all this is the unique Fuller's yeast strain. Now, some of you may be familiar with this, and I always say that if you really want to see the characteristics of the Fuller's yeast, then try some Bengal Lancer, because that's got a very tangy marmalade, orange zest type note to it, and that's coming from the yeast, and that's what you get from the from the Fuller's yeast, and it's a signature in almost all their beers, and it's strong in some beers and it's not so strong in other beers. Some people might call it jammy. It's not jammy. That's what it is. It's I wouldn't say harsh, but it's like an orange, a bitter, very bitter orange marmalade. Do you remember the rind you used to get in Robinson's marmalade? It's a little bit like that. If you used to eat the rind on its own, it was quite bitter. That's what it's like. But it's great. It works so well in Fuller's beers, and as I say, it's quite prominent in some beers, not so prominent in most of them, especially like the ESB. There's quite a lot of invert sugar in that, so that sort of dulls that bitterness down a little bit. London Pride, you do get a little touch of it, but if you really want to see what it's like, get yourself onto the Bengal Lancer, and that's like a showcase for the Fuller's yeast. But it's got that in there as well. So on paper, it looks fantastic, but there's only one way to find out what a beer's like, and that's to get it into the glass. Right, I am really fucking looking forward to this, because this is a treat for me every year. I love it. I just think it's the best beer to come out of England. Now, if you like this but you can't afford the £7, get some Tint Meadow Trappist Ale. Is probably the nearest you're going to come to it. That is an absolutely outstanding beer. It really is good. Right, I'm just going to pour a little bit out because I want to get these aromas. and I'm pouring it into that sort of Belgian glass, because the tulip glass, because I really do want to put this into the right glass and get all the aromas from it. Oh, it just smells heavenly. I mean, it really does. Pungent fruit on there. Oh, but there's some really interesting fruity notes. I can feel that alcohol, them ethanol fumes. They're actually tickling the inside of my nose. Right, there's intense dark fruit, if you can imagine that. It's really, really intense. There's a sweetness to it as well, which I'm imagining is coming from that crystal malt, that double roasted crystal malt, I should say. But there's some subtle, spicy hop character notes that are coming through there as well, like sort of black pepper. Oh, honestly, I could sniff this for an hour, and with every nostril, I would get a different aroma. I'm getting floral notes on this now as well. It's so good, but really strong. I mean, this is really, really strong in the ethanol department. Now, ethanol doesn't have a smell, but this is 8.5, and I know it's going to be very similar to a Belgian double, which, you know, you only have to open the lid on a Belgian double and you can get the aromas. Or I should say, well, would it be a quadruple? No, it's probably more like a double. But the flavour intensity on this is the equivalent of a Belgian quadruple. It's got that intensity. I'm not talking about the flavours, although they are similar in a way, but the flavour intensity is on a par with that. As you can see, the head is dissipating. That's not surprising because of the ethanol content on this. This is 8.5, so you have to remember that. Oh, it just smells really nice. Honestly, I'm getting bombarded with so many aromas. It is so complex that it's just difficult to decipher every single one. I'm getting distinct black cherry. That's what's hitting me now. The ethanol, though, that's what's doing it for me. It's tingling the inside of my nose. I can feel it. Oh, this is really good. And I could, honestly, as I say, I could spend hours just talking about the aroma, but I don't want to. I don't want to bore the shit out of you. So let's get it down my fat Gregory Peck. Good elf. Oh, fuck. That is, the finish. A unique toffee and biscuit finish on this. Now, this is room temperature, and I've deliberately kept this at room temperature because I want to get all them flavours. I would recommend that if you're going to have this, chill this a little bit. Not too much. Don't have it ice cold, obviously. You're going to just kill all the flavour. I'm having this at room temperature because I want to get everything in there. And I'm going to pour everything in here because it's got some sediment in there as well. That head's going to dissipate quite soon too. But it's just, that first mouthful is just so intense. It really is. There is a big ethanol backbone on that as well. I will say I am getting lots of that. It's probably because this is at room temperature. Maybe if it was chilled a little bit more, you wouldn't get so much of that. So if you're going to drink this, as I say, chill it a little bit. It may take away, it won't remove it, but it will take away a little bit of the edge on that ethanol backbone, because that could potentially put some people off. And I really don't want you to be put off by this beer because it's really, really intense and it's very, very complex. I will say, as nice as this is, I mean, it is nice. I shouldn't really be doing this I shouldn't really be comparing from memory beers from last year. I don't think this is as good as last year's vintage ale. That for me was absolutely outstanding. It really was. The one I compared with the Batemans, that was huge. This, there's a lot of flavour on there. However, I'm getting most of it on the finish. The finish is really big toffee, really big floral bitterness from the hops, spicy bitterness I should say, not floral bitterness. There are floral notes on there. And that's Percy snoring. Percy, you're stealing me thunder, mate. He's just woken up. Let me dive in again. Mouth feels quite dry and earthy. This really is all about the finish. Now, as of before, as I was saying, with the last year's vintage ale, there was a hell of a lot of character on the palate, and I'm not getting it with this. This is, I wouldn't say dull on the palate, but there's a lot of ambiguous flavours. It's only when you swallow, and that's when all the flavours kick in, and the finish lasts for ages. So what I'm getting at the moment is intense dark fruit, a toffee finish coupled with some dark fruits, forest fruits, with raisin on top of that as well. There's also a slight biscuit element to that as well. Ethanol backbone all the way through. I am getting that. There's a sweetness to it as well, which I think is probably a little bit of that invert sugar that they've put into this as well. And there's that earthiness running through it too. I imagine that's coming from the Opus hops. But it is good. I really am enjoying this. I will say though, this is a beer to savour. You're not going to neck this because, quite frankly, it's not that kind of beer. This is a beer to be savoured, and savouring it I am. I'm just trying to get my head around all these really complex flavours, because there is just so much going on in there. Wow. The more I drink, the more flavours I'm getting. And it really is testing my skill as a beer reviewer to get all them flavours over to you. It's like it just isn't like any other beer. It really is unique. Yes, it's got the characteristic of, for example, the Golden Pride. If you've ever had the Golden Pride, that's got the big fruity notes on that, and it's got a seam of ethanol running through it. It's got the sweetness, which is either coming from the crystal malt or maybe a little bit of invert sugar. I don't know, but there was a definite sweetness on there. But there's a hell of a lot more going on. Just at the top, there's other flavours that I'm really trying to pin down. There is that mustiness, earthy note on there. But for me, this is all about the finish. Deep, big, intense toffee, raisin, slight alcohol, spirit alcohol, ethanol, whatever you want to call it, on there. But for me, what's really doing it is the hops on this. There's a hop character on here, or a combination of the hops, which is really, really, I wouldn't say blowing my mind, but really got my senses working, trying to work out what they are, in a good way, if you know what I mean. definitely some kind of sweet fruit on that, and it's not the dark type fruit. It's not peach though, not really a citrus type fruit. I don't know what it is, but it's nice, and I'm trying to put my finger on it, and I can't. I think it's cherry. That's what I'm getting, like a dark cherry style flavour to it. Which, again, I mean, cherry in a beer is nice. I don't care what anyone says. I mean, obviously you've got your lambics, your creek beers, your Belgian creek beers, which is just made of cherries. But a little subtle cherry hint on a beer, for me, really does go down well. I had the Schlenkerler Weichel, I think it's called, and that was done with smoked cherry wood. And there was a little bit of a cherry seam on that, and that really was nice. This, however, has got something similar, and it's good. I mean, it really is good. But there was a bitterness to it, and some might perceive that as the alcohol in here, because that you do sort of get that ethanol note, very similar to Belgian doubles, but there is, I think, a hop spiciness to it, a black pepper spice, which is another characteristic that on top of all the other flavours as well. I mean, this is so complex, and I literally could speak for an hour about this beer. With every mouthful, things change in a good way. And I love it, and that's typical of Fuller's Vintage Ale. However, again, I want to reiterate, I would have this, obviously if you're not reviewing it, have this a little bit chilled, and I think it will give it a hell of a lot more body than it's got. Not that it needs it. I mean, it's pretty full bodied as it is, but it may round off some of the edges for you, because I would imagine at room temperature, not many people will like this. I absolutely love it, but I love Belgian beers. I love the quadruples, and I love the doubles, the dark Belgian beers. I absolutely love them. Some people who I know have tried them, they're not a fan. They say it's treacly. They call it treacle, you know, that kind of flavour, and sickly and all that. It's not. It's just it's got a sweetness to it which they're not used to, and it's dark and it's bitter and it's fruity, and it's basically just packed with flavour, and they don't like it. Some people don't like that, and I get it, but I'm loving this. This is fantastic. Yeah, that's another winner from Fuller's. That is fantastic. A real flavour experience that you really need to savour this. You can't gulp it, and I've gulped quite a bit down actually, and I shouldn't really have done that, but this is a fantastic beer. It truly is one of a kind. So what is the verdict on Fuller's Vintage Ale? Well, again, this is another winner from Fuller's. However, I don't think it's as good as the 2022 one that I tried or reviewed last year with the Batemans. That for me was just amazing. That was a fantastic beer that Fuller's excelled themselves with. This is also a fantastic beer, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think it's as good as last year's, but it's still an outstanding beer. I mean, when you're comparing exceptional beers to exceptional beers, you're going to be stumped. And I mean, this really is so good that it's leaving me, I wouldn't say lost for words, but because the flavour bombardment, because I've been reviewing German beers quite a lot now recently, this is a complete curveball for me, and it's just reminded me how good a brewer Fuller's is, B, how good this vintage ale range is, and C, how good the beer that this country can produce when it wants to. And as I say, you know, if you like this style of beer, then the Tint Meadow, you're not going to go wrong with that. But if you're feeling flush, then get yourself some of this, because this really is the top of the tree when it comes to English brewing. You will not get a better beer, in my opinion, in terms of flavour, in terms of complex aromas, complex flavours, complex finish and flavour intensity. I really don't think there's another beer on the market, certainly not when it comes to English beer, that can compare with this. Now obviously they do pull out all the stops, and Fuller's are a very, very experienced brewer. Even though they've been taken over by Asahi, some people have said, oh, you know, the quality of the beer has gone tits up, and London Pride doesn't taste the same. Well, that may be the case, but the vintage ale is still as good as it's always been, and I love it. For me, this is a 10 out of 10 beer. It's I can't stop enthusing about how good this beer is, and I really don't want you to miss out on trying this beer, because it really is what this country does best. And if anyone thinks, you know, oh, the English not very good brewers, their lager's crap, which you've probably got a point. They've swallowed the American pill, and all the brewers want to brew IPA and craft beer now. Get yourself down to Fuller's, or get online, get onto the Fuller's website and just buy yourself any vintage, because you're not going to go wrong with any year of the vintage ale. Obviously there's going to be differences slight differences in flavour, but you really are missing out if you don't try this. This is the peak of British brewing. It's lovely, it's fantastic. Personally, I think I should have maybe chilled it, but I really wanted to get all the flavours. If I wasn't reviewing this, then I would have probably put it in the fridge. That would have given it a little bit more of a rounded edge, but I really wanted to get all the flavours in this beer, hence the reason I'm drinking this at room temperature, and hence the reason I'm trying my best to describe all these flavours, because this is so complex. It really is. Every mouthful has got another flavour to discover. So I'll leave it up to you, see what you think, but for me that is 10 out of 10 all day long. It's what this country does best. If you want to get an idea, if you can't afford the vintage ale, get yourself a bottle of Tint Meadow, and you're in the sort of region, or even a bottle of Golden Pride. Golden Pride is near to what this is, but it hasn't got the magic dust that this stuff has got. It's an amazing beer, truly unique, and I would put that up against any beer in the world. And yeah, I do believe, I mean, it's all personal taste, but I do believe this will come out on top. Fuller's, done yourself proud again. Well done. And remember, just like this stuff, beer is working class champagne.